Hello, everybody, and welcome to your live event. My name is Eric Wynkoop, and in particular, I want to welcome you to my office hours. And this is your opportunity to ask a food or cooking related question. And it's my chance to do my best to give you a good answer, one that'll get you on your way back to cooking. And as we get started today, I want to mention just a couple of the usual housekeeping tips. And the first one is if you would like to participate more directly in today's program, you can enter a question or a comment in the dialog box in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. And also, while we're on this topic, on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see several questions already queued up. And if you would like me to answer one of those questions sooner than later, you can click on the heart-shaped icon that's in that individual question box, and that'll move it up in priority. Otherwise, I will get to all the questions today. All right. Without further ado, let's go ahead and jump on into the questions for today's office hours. And the first one is from Yolanda, who says, I just learned in this course that maple syrup is not the same as pure maple syrup, and pure is the one recommended. How many grams of sugar is recommended per 2 tablespoon serving size? Is total sugars of 24 grams too high? So a couple of parts to this question. Let me respond to the first statement about maple syrup versus pure maple syrup by saying that really what we have here is maple syrup, right, being the real thing. And then we have artificial maple syrups, which are basically sugar syrups with some caramel coloring added and then some flavoring. And the flavorings come from different sources, but one is fenugreek seeds, which is a spice, a common spice, but it has a mapley sort of a flavor to it. And so often when a company makes, imitation maple syrup, they'll use fenugreek as a flavoring. But I'm sure there are also organic compounds that might be used to replicate that flavor as well. So, because the price is so different, and there is really a desire by the maple syrup industry, meaning those that actually tap the trees, to bring focus back, right, to their real product, their authentic, their pure maple syrup, that some companies started emphasizing the natural product by calling it pure maple syrup. Okay, so I want to hopefully put out a little bit of clarification around how these terms are used or how you might think about these terms that you see on labels. Okay, it's really maple syrup, which is the real thing, sometimes called pure maple syrup to further highlight its natural state versus the imitation product. And, regarding sugar content, I've seen maple syrups labels recommend or state, I should say, a 2 tablespoon serving size. And it is pretty common to have 24 grams of sugar or thereabouts associated with that 2 tablespoon serving size. So I don't think that's too high. I think that's pretty typical for a real or pure maple syrup. Hope that helps, Yolanda. Thank you. And next up from Jean, who writes, when making pasta sauce using canned crushed tomatoes, is sugar the best sweetener to use to reduce the acidity, or can maple syrup be used, or date paste or date syrup, without affecting flavor? So the first response I'm going to give you is that you may use any sweetener of your choice. So it can be any of those that you mentioned or anything else that's sweet that you can think of. And that might include applesauce, right, or agave syrup or something else. Now, regarding the effect on flavor, please note generally that as we change a recipe or add something to a recipe, in this case, that change, right, that ingredient substitution or that addition in this case will usually have some flavor of its own. And so while it has a taste, in this case, sweet, depending on what you choose, whether it's applesauce or dates or maple syrup, the accompanying flavor is unique to that product. So will it affect the flavor? Yes, it will. And it's going to be your objective to try out different sweeteners to see what you like best. Also, keep in mind that different ingredients will impart different colors. And, in this case, clearly something like date paste or maple syrup will impart a dark color. But even within that choice, there are different color intensities with maple syrup, for example. So, do think about those outcomes that accompany any sort of ingredient change that you might make to a recipe, including pasta sauce, tomato-based pasta sauce. All right. So again, taste, take notes. I always recommend taking notes in the kitchen. Have a notepad dedicated to your cooking, with a pen or pencil nearby, so that you can make illustrations. You can take notes. You can put down questions to test in the future, and take a that's sort of a deeper, more engaged approach to your cooking. All right. And next up is a question from Connie, who says, I don't drink alcohol, and I read that adding wine to foods retains 40% of the alcohol after cooking for 15 minutes and 25% after 60 minutes. What can I use as a replacement? Yes, I have heard numbers similar to this, that it just takes a while to drive off the alcohol during the cooking process. And even then, you might have some small percentage that lingers for quite some time. And so for anyone that is interested in omitting alcohol from a recipe, generally my first recommendation is to simply omit the alcohol. Typically, alcohol is used as a flavoring ingredient and is added in a pretty small quantity. It might be 1 fluid ounce or 2 or 3 fluid ounces, in which case simply omitting that is not going to alter the flavor in a negative way. Okay. If you were to make 2 batches of that something and taste them side by side, depending on the alcoholic beverage that's used or recommended, you might pick up the difference. I mean, hopefully you would. That's the point of using the alcohol. But if you just simply omit it, you're probably not going to miss it. Just take a look at the volume that is decreased by the omission and bring it up by the addition of water or stock. It could be another flavorful liquid. Typically, when we work with liquids in this situation, we want to think about a flavorful liquid to replace a flavorful liquid. Or like if you're making soup or stew, we try to use stock instead of water, right, to emphasize the richer flavor that will be the result of your cooking. So, think about using stock first. That's going to be the easiest solution. Okay, thank you. And we have a question from Maria, who says, what ingredient could be added to cashew parmesan to give more cheese flavor without adding additional nutritional yeast? I have thought of lemon, but don't know in what form to give it tang. Okay, so I see a couple of different questions here. So the first one is to give more of a cheese flavor. So cheese flavor, Generally speaking, means umami. It could mean a more specific cheese sort of a flavor, but more if we step back and think about um, taste and flavor development, I think about umami. And in order to get that flavor right into foods, what I often use is miso paste. And in fact, with a lot of sauces and soups and stews, I'll use miso paste, and I've got a couple of them at least all the time in the refrigerator. Now, I also mentioned that my colleague Chef Shar suggests miso powder, and you can find that pretty typically in your grocery stores these days. And so do check around and see what might be available in your urban area. But miso powder is basically miso paste that's been dried and then powdered to create an ingredient, that can be used without imparting so much liquid, or it might be easier to use because it's in a powder form, a dry form versus a wet form. So consider that as well. But do think about even other ingredients. I'm going to talk about cooking more generally for just a moment here, but think about Vegemite or a mole paste, from the Mexican cooking tradition. These are a couple of other examples that are very rich in flavor and also umami from, all of the ingredients that go into them. In the case of, Vegemite and some of these similar ingredients, they're fermented as well. So, give these a try and see if there's one or two ingredients that really resonate with you that you might want to keep in your inventory. But miso powder and miso paste would be a couple of things that I would start with first. Thank you. And let's see. The second part of Maria's question was adding lemon to the cashew parmesan give it some tang. Yeah, you bet. I mean, any sort of a acidulant, something that imparts acidity, is going to give it some tang. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, as we make a change, in this case, in addition to a recipe, you've got a taste, and then you have flavors, right, that accompany that taste typically to think about. So if you want some acidity, you think about lemon juice or lime juice, or maybe it's citric acid powder, or there are other ingredients also that impart sourness or tartness. And then think about the accompanying flavor. And the lemon juice will, of course, give you a lemon flavor versus lime juice, which will give you a similar sourness, but it'll impart a different accompanying flavor. So again, give these things a try and see how you like them. And what comes to mind for me is that you might choose to use different items depending on how you use your cashew parmesan, because that flavor that's now imparted to that cashew parmesan might go better with a certain dish that you're preparing versus a different dish that you're preparing. Okay, so again, give these a try, take notes, and go forth by enjoying some more complex cooking, some more varied and nuanced cooking. Thank you. All right, we've got Pauline's question up next. Hello, Pauline. And the question is, you once mentioned making miso soup for breakfast. I'm curious, how do you turn it into a wholesome meal, or is it just a side dish? So for breakfast, it's a meal. And the way to turn that into a meal is just to bulk it up with vegetables. That's the easiest thing that I find. That's what I've been doing for many years now. This morning, for example, miso soup was, kombu dashi, right? Or a stock based on kelp. And the dashi can vary as well, right? Sometimes I'll use bonito flakes and kombu in a typical Japanese fashion, and you can use one or the other. There are different types of dashi as well. Some of them are plant-based, some of them are not. But anyway, this morning it was kombu dashi, and the vegetables were carrots and broccoli and daikon with the addition of tofu. And I try to have some tofu on hand, and we'll add that to the soup. The vegetables will vary, and they vary quite a bit just depending on what's in the fridge. And you can adjust the quantity as well relative to the liquid in order to change that feel, right, of that soup. And give it a try. If you want to add more layering of umami, you get some mushrooms in there, for example. And then also, I like to mention that, when it comes to using miso paste, I mentioned a few minutes ago that I've always got at least two flavors of miso. One is a white or a shiro miso, and then one is going to be a red or an aka miso. And those will give you some different salt profiles, some different sweetness profiles, and different flavorings as well. There are other miso pastes to choose from, and sometimes I'll have something else in the inventory, whether it's a chickpea miso or something else, or again, many on the market. Also keep in mind that you can mix different types of miso paste. So if you want to keep just red and white, you can mix those to create something in between. That's done in Japan, and it's quite fine to do more generally. And also, there's a salt content, right, associated with miso. And if you want to decrease your salt consumption, then consider a couple of things. One is that there are low salt miso pastes on the market that you might consider, or you can make a more robust flavored stock, with whatever you choose to use, whether it's the kombu or the katsuobushi or the bonito flakes or something else, and then use less miso paste in the soup while still creating a satisfying, soup, for your end product. So those are a few things to keep in mind, but definitely you can up the game when it comes to miso soup and make it more hearty by increasing the internal ingredients and calling that the meal. Enjoy. Thank you. Next up, we have a question from Cindy, who says, what are the best ways to wash fruits and vegetables? Let's see. Yeah, I don't know about the best, like if there's a single best way, although you'd mentioned plural here, but I'll touch upon at least a couple of ways, a couple of things to consider. And one would be to simply run it under some running water and just use your fingers to rub the surface of the produce as needed to remove anything that's loose. And you might also consider a commercially available, in other words, probably from your grocery store, available a rinse, and it's going to be in some sort of a concentrated form that you would dilute with water, just following the directions on the label. And you would soak your produce for some number of minutes or some length of time in this solution. You can also create your own by using baking soda, and one ratio that I've seen is about a third of a cup of baking soda to 3 cups or so of water. And this can give you enough volume to soak a number of different produce items. Okay, and then adjust that, of course, as you need to. Then there's vinegar. Vinegar might be a quarter cup to a half a cup per cup or so of water. You can adjust that depending on just what it is that you want to work with in terms of the intensity here. But those are some home remedies, some home options that you could easily put together, and see if there's something in there that fits your routine. in terms of when you buy, when you go shopping, as you unload your groceries, is your kitchen sink clear or large bowls available to soak produce and get all that stuff done before you store them, or is there a different routine where you might interject, that soaking or cleansing step? But those are going to be a few ways that people do this, and hopefully you'll find a solution in there that works for you. Thank you. All right. Next up, we got a question from Philip, who says, your seafood and Chef Pepin courses were great. Do you have any plans to do more courses like that? Maybe one with Chef Eric Ripert. Great question. At present, we don't have any conversations going with Chef Ripert, but I like the idea. And I'm happy to mention that to my other colleagues as we come together every once in a while to talk about new course ideas. Thank you, Philip. And let's see, also from Philip, we have a message that says, we had previously talked about maybe doing a course of heritage breeds and how, as chefs, we can bring awareness to using these breeds. Yeah, that's a great question as well. Typically, we'll when we partner with somebody, there's negotiation around the costs that are involved, and then we move forward with that. And so, if there's some interest in that from the Heritage Breeding Association or the larger community out there, this sort of thing is certainly a possibility and one that is open for discussion. Thank you. Next up, from Sherry, we have a question that says, what are the best tips to preserve the green, the color of green vegetables when steaming them, since steaming requires a lid? Yes, this is a question that comes up every once in a while. And, the suggestion that I have, and what works for me really, is to manage your cooking time. That's going to be the biggest factor when it comes to the degradation of chlorophyll. It's going to be your cooking time. So, my suggestion is to keep a close eye on that, and you can control the size of these items by your prep, right, and how small you might cut them, preparing for the steaming. And then, again, take notes if you need to, but just control your steaming time to get to a point where the color is still preserved and you have a texture that you can work with, and hopefully one that is not too soft, still gives you some satisfaction as you chew your food, yet gives you some nice color to look at as well. Thank you. And let's see, our next question today is from Linda, who says, I'd like to know how to increase the quantity of ingredients in a recipe when cooking a larger meal. Is there a simple formula or method to follow to scale liquid or solid? Yes. So the first stage, right, if you're going to increase the quantity a little bit, and when I say a little bit, I'm talking about maybe 3 times or so. You can very simply use 3 as your multiplying factor against each of the ingredients and create a recipe that is 3 times larger than the original. Okay. And, here I'm thinking about recipes that are home size recipes that might feed a half a dozen people or so. As you get into larger, increases in a recipe, say 10 times or more, then you can take your factor of 10 and apply it to the main ingredients, the main liquids and solid ingredients, and bring that up. But when it comes to those more intensely flavored ingredients like spices and salt, any of these seasonings, go smaller first, because very often we don't need 10x of those ingredients. That's often just how it works out. Now, and that's not saying you will not need that, but I'm saying you might not need it. And it's certainly easier to add ingredients if you need them rather than deal with too intense of a flavor from too much salt, for example. So you would increase your main ingredient, your liquids and solids, by 10x, and then approach these other more intense flavorings and seasonings at a smaller rate. Maybe it's 2/3 or so, and then make adjustments from there. And here again, you're going to need to take notes because depending on what you're making, depending on these ingredients in question, as well as the freshness of those ingredients in question, how much adjustment you need to make could vary. And I don't necessarily have that answer for you. So you'll need to taste as you make the adjustments and take notes as you make the adjustments. And you're going to find a balance that's going to work for you. And then moving forward, based upon the consistency of the product specifications, right, or the details around each ingredient that you use, meaning the brand and the variety of that ingredient and the freshness of that ingredient, including the freshness of the spices that you use, you can come up with a consistent recipe at this larger 10x volume. Okay, so there could be a bit of a process that's involved to do that, but you're going to come up with a recipe that's going to be unique to your situation. Okay, and so be open to some experimentation along the way. Thank you. Excuse me just a second here. All right, next question is from Melissa, who writes, when completing the grilling assignment, I enjoyed the caramelization and tenderness of the zucchini, mushrooms, and pineapple I made. I prefer not to grill due to health concerns. What would be the best way to achieve these results without grilling? Okay, so in terms of caramelization and general cooking with the development of flavor, we're talking about dry heat cooking methods. So think very simply about other dry heat cooking methods aside from grilling. And so sautéing and broiling comes to mind, but broiling could be very similar to grilling. But sautéing is going to be a very common one. Okay, very easy to do, be on a stovetop, and give that a try. Now, when you say you prefer not to grill due to health concerns, I'm guessing that you're referring to these chemical compounds like HCA and PAH. And my understanding is that HCA is associated specifically with meat cookery, in which case you should be okay doing zucchini, mushrooms, and pineapple, even in a grilling setting. But PAH is associated with fats, and it could also therefore be associated with vegetable cookery, in which case you want to bring the temperature down to try to avoid or minimize these chemical changes that take place, especially at higher temperatures. Another thing is with grilling, you might try some indirect heat, meaning as you set up your grill, you put your source of the fire, like charcoal, on one side, and then your food items on the grill away from the fire source. Or if you're working with a gas grill, you can put one bank of the gas on, but turn the other one off and try to put your food on the other side, in other words. And so you're working in that hot environment, especially once you put the lid down, but without the direct heat of the fire. And so try those things, but also take a look at some more of the literature on this broader topic to address more specifically what your concerns are, to understand it and to see what steps forward might be best for your situation. Thank you. And let's see, next we've got a question from Denise, who says, on the FOK Ultimate Cooking course, making the wild rice salad, one of the ingredients is barley miso. Is it okay to use any type of miso? I'm allergic to gluten. Yes, feel free to use any sort of miso, right? The author of that recipe, for whatever reason, liked barley miso and put that down as a recommendation, but certainly you can use any type of miso paste. Keeping in mind, as I mentioned a little bit earlier in today's program, that as you make a change, the results will be a little bit different in terms of flavor or possibly appearance. And it's going to be up to you to try it out and to see how you like the changes that you make. All right, go forth and have fun. Thank you. And let's see, the next question from Lai says, does increasing the temperature of the oven to cook something faster also dry out the food? Yes, you bet. It would also hasten that drying process. So there's going to be a balance there that you want to achieve, by adjusting the cooking time, as well as the size of the food items that you place on your sheet pan. And so larger items will dry out slower than small items. Okay, they will also require a little bit more cooking, but you can adjust the heat as you're talking about to get more intense heat into that item to cook it faster. And so there's a balance in there. Hopefully that will create a result that you like. Now, I will also mention that if you have a gas oven, and I'm going to at least speak on based upon my experience here at home on this topic, a gas oven on the very bottom, in other words, on the floor of the oven, we're not talking racks here, we're talking about the floor of the oven, will have just a smooth surface, right? Unlike an electric oven, which will have a heating element on the bottom, okay? A gas oven, in most cases, should have just a flat surface. And I will often put my sheet pan directly on the floor of the oven to get really intense heat. And it'll brown foods relatively quickly and cook them relatively quickly. And it works very nicely for me. And you might give that a try and see how you like those results. Thank you. All right. And the last question for today's program is from Denise again, who says, I prepare dinners for my grandchildren often. They are 3 and 6 and not keen on vegetables. I'm trying to prepare healthy meals. They love Japanese food. I would love some ideas. Miso and tofu is a go-to. Let's see here. Well, you can always try miso soup, as we talked about earlier, which comes in an infinite number of flavors and textures and appearances. Let's see, tofu, a lot of different ways to create tofu in terms of, sauteed vegetable toppings. Another idea that I've had success with the 3 and 6-year-old crowd is to make Japanese style curry rice. And at least to start with, I will recommend that you look for the curry roux, which comes in a box about this big. And I find this at a Japanese grocery store in town, but you can find this product at other grocery stores sometimes. You'll need to look around. But all the spices are all mixed up in the roux. And super simple to use, but it gives you the opportunity to add vegetables of your choice. And for that audience, what I have done is I will grate the onions, the carrots, the potatoes, whatever it is that's going in there, so that once it's all cooked down, no one knows what's in there. And so far, I haven't had anyone object to the flavor of Japanese curry. And, I've even had some kids that have been really picky eaters. And I mean, super duper picky eaters. And their parents would whisper in my ear and tell me, I don't think my kid's going to like this. And guess what? Their child asked for seconds. And I'm not talking about my cooking here. I'm talking about simply Japanese curry. And so give that a try. It comes in different heat levels from 0 up to a little bit hot. And so you can pick that also for your audience. Now, the next step, if you get that under your belt and it works out for everybody, is that you can make your own Japanese style curry. And that's what I've been doing. It's a lengthier process and a lot of fun. You can experiment with it and make some adjustments. I'm still somewhere on this learning curve myself, but having a great time with it. But that's another way to create this dish, but without some of the additives of a processed food, right? That you're using with the curry roux. Okay. Now, the other thing that comes to mind, for kiddos, and this will work for both of them, and that is to get them involved in the cooking process. But what I've found, generally speaking, and maybe specifically speaking too, is that when a child has their hands in on the food that they're going to eat, that they are going to trust the results more because their input, right, their fingerprint is on the meal. So get them involved in some small way for the 3-year-old and some larger way for the 6-year-old. And you will also instill so many other good habits around food. Knowledge of ingredients, knowledge of how to use a knife, how to control heat and time, and just those basics of cooking will become natural for them as they grow up at your side. So when it comes to more ideas using miso and tofu, there are so many out there, and I suggest that you go online or pick up a book at your local library and just play with things. And you're bound to find a lot of things in this sort of framework that you and I just sketched out that will work for everybody at the table. And I suspect there's going to be a lot of enjoyable food prep sessions ahead as well. All right. And this brings us to the end of today's program. And I want to thank each of you for your participation today, whether you were quietly in the audience or whether you submitted a question or a comment. I appreciate that. And until we meet again, happy cooking.